Now then, YouTube, today we are here to talk about the three peaks. This is hopefully going to be a pretty definitive guide on everything that kind of goes on with the race, your preparation, actual race day, and all that good stuff. I won the under 23 race last year. I was 31st overall in a time of 3 hours 27. So hopefully I'm somewhat qualified to talk about this. So yeah, I was supposed to be racing this year, but I now might not be because I have demolished my ankle on the curb outside of Home Bargains. Of all places. It's currently a week to go, so I'm not sure if I'm going to be racing. So I thought, what better way to not race than to help everyone else out with a bit of insight on what's going on. So training wise, obviously we've got a week to go. So at this point, it's purely panic training. If you're watching this video and you've not done any training at all, I would suggest you're probably in a little bit of trouble, but that's fine. We'll skip past that. I think what we've probably been looking at for me, it was addressing my weaknesses from last year. So my times on the up the hills and on all the flat sections were really strong. That was kind of like top 15, top 20 on all those segments. But my real weaknesses last year were the descents. So that was something I really focused on coming into it this year. In terms of really riding my cross bike. I've been riding it, 3-4 times a week since July, basically. So the last 2-3 months, really been on it, getting those long rides in on the cross bike as well, doing technical descents, making sure I'm really comfortable on it with my setup completely dialed in. So always kind of chopping and changing little bits here and there, like stack height and stem length and stuff like that to make sure I've got really the perfect setup for it. And that had kind of been the main focus of my training, obviously getting physically fit. I've been doing sort of 12 hours a week on the bike, a couple of hours a week running. But yeah, my main concern for this year was addressing my weaknesses from last year. And obviously, if you've not done the event before, you don't know what your weaknesses are. A lot of people think running training is really important for the three peaks. I have been running. I wouldn't say it's like super important, simply because you don't really actually run unless your name's Rob Jebb. I was certainly walking just about everything last year because the hills are so steep and horrible. It is just not particularly possible to run. So yeah, I would say what's possibly more important than actually going running is, picking up your bike and walking up steep hills or, stairs, that sort of thing, to actually get that sort of specific training that's going to really push you on, like in those kind of areas that you're getting on the 3P. We're a week out. If you're looking for something to do in this last week, I'd probably suggest a couple of maybe 2-hour rides on the cross bike, just getting those last little skills dialed in. I wouldn't go for anything massive, maybe a long endurance ride this weekend coming up. I don't know when this video is going out, but yeah, I wouldn't do anything massive in the week before because you want to be nice and fresh coming into it and ready to go for the race. As well, with kit, obviously you've got your mandatory kit that's in the rule books that you have to take with you. That's a rain jacket, a whistle, and the survival shelter. So making sure you've got all those sorted before the race. You can literally just buy them off Amazon if you really need to, but something light and packable for your jacket. Just like a clear rain jacket that will fit in your back pocket. And then in terms of survival shelter, last year I had mine taped to my seat post, so it was out of the way, always attached to the bike. That also freed up space in my back pockets for stuff like food and tools that I could then have to hand, whereas that survival shelter, I didn't need it, all the time. And the whistle, I just had attached to a piece of string around my neck, just making sure that you've got all those bits, because if you turn up to Silent without those, they're not going to let you race. So that's a really important thing to do this week. And then obviously in terms of food as well, it's quite a personal topic for me, because I was looking at doing the race and sort of, somewhere between the 3.5 hour mark. I was basically going to be living off stuff like gels and energy drink, which is, if you're looking at sort of like, a 4.5, 5 hour time, something like that, that's going to be quite a bit more difficult to do. So I think planning your race, realistically is something that's really good to do. We'll get into this on the route and stuff like that. I was looking at living off maybe 3 gels and kind of three like beta fuel mixes, which is obviously not a lot. So in terms of spares like tools and stuff like that, for me, I was going to have quite a lot of support out on the course. So I wasn't going to take a whole load of spares, mainly just something like a CO2 canister, tire plugs, an Allen key, and probably a quick link as well. Because yeah, for me, if I had a problem like a puncture or a snap chain and stuff like that, I was going to have a couple of spare bikes, spare wheels out on the course with like friends and family and that sort of stuff. So I wasn't in a whole load of need to really have like a really extensive list of spares. But I think if you're doing it much more self-supported, one bike job, that sort of thing, you are going to want much more comprehensive repair kit on you. So that's obviously stuff like spare tubes, definitely quick links. Have something like a snap chain, a puncture, that is sort of a race ender if you don't have the right spares. So I'd much rather sit on the side of the road for 5 minutes to repair it than have to have a very lonely spin back to Helith Bridge. So yeah, I think getting on top of your spares, I would say probably at least 2 tubes for something like the 3 Peaks, even if you're running tyre inserts. If you're not going to have a spare bike or spare wheels on the course, I think two punctures of, it's not particularly unlikely that you're going to get a puncture or 2. I would say a pump, obviously. I like CO2 canisters as well because, it just makes repairing that puncture so much quicker. And they're also, small and light and easy to pack in your pockets or a saddlebag or that sort of thing compared to a mini pump. And then, a multi-tool. So obviously getting wheels in and out, tightening anything up that might come loose, like, in a crash or anything like that. And making sure you've got like a quick link for repairing your chain. And I would say that's probably about it on the front of spares. And one thing that Chris behind the camera mentioned is definitely making sure that you are wearing gloves, because it's quite an easy event to crash on, which I found out last year. Your hands are taking a big beating on this race. You will probably get cramp in them at some point. So gloves just kind of lessen that impact of the trail, of the road, and just making sure as well, if it's raining, if it's cold, which obviously it's the end of September, it's kind of likely to be in this neck of the woods, because if you turn up without gloves like you would for a normal road ride or, September cross race, and it's 5 degrees and raining, I think you're going to have a pretty horrible day. So now kind of the route of the race, you've kind of got all your stuff prepared. You come into the start line. How are you gonna attack the race, or not attack it, as it may be? I think the first really important thing is actually where you're starting in the race on the grid. For me, I was going to get gridded this year because I won last year, so that would have been really nice, but might not be the case. But you really want to be as far forward as you possibly can be, regardless of what time you're going for or who you are or who you think you sat next to on the grid. You want to be as far forward as possible on that start grid as you go up the climb and as you turn onto Ingleborough, because the further up you are, the further you start, it's basically free race time if you start towards the front, because if the further back you start, the more people you have to fight your way through. So when you're walking up Simon's Fell, if you're starting at the back of the race, you're starting 100 wheels deep, 50 wheels deep, you've just got more and more and more people that you have to try and overtake, and that's more effort that you have to put in. Whereas for me, I started Simon's Fell in about 10th or 15th wheel last year, and that just allowed me to walk at my own pace and slip back through the pack on that kind of really steep walking section. I would say I wanted to pace it conservatively last year because, it's a long race. I hadn't really done anything like it before. So having that front position just allows you to slide back and ride at your own pace. Good positioning is quite possibly the most important thing to starting to have a good race. Because if you come in really far back, out of position or anything like that, I think regardless of what time you want to do, whether you're looking at doing it in 3 hours or 5 to 6 hours, try and be as far up as possible, kind of in that neutralized car section into Ingleborough, because it's just going to make your life so much easier throughout the whole race. And then the route, obviously, it comes from, you start at Helith Bridge, you come up the road section to Ingleborough and you take that left onto Simon's Fell. Originally, you come through a little farm section and then you're straight onto the Rampas Inhumanas of Simon's Fell, which is basically just a vertical grass wall, which you have to carry your bike up. My big advice for this is, as I just said before, take it at your own pace. Don't do anything silly. Don't be a hero on this first section because it'll take a lot out of you. I think if you watched the Lachlan Morton documentary, the EF Gone Racing from 2019, he did the exact opposite of this and blew himself up and probably cost himself the race. Now, I don't expect most people watching this to be challenging for the win, but it could cost you like 30 minutes at the end of the race if you blow yourself up here. It's a long race and there's a lot to be made up later on. So I think making sure you go in your own pace to make sure that you're going to be all right later on up Simon's Fell. As you crest Simon's Fell, you get onto Lord's Seat, which is then a nice little plateau over to the stile, which is a big old wooden structure over the wall. There'll be people there to help you with your bike, which is nice. You might have seen in previous years people just chucking a bike straight over the wall. That's not the case anymore, or it wasn't last year at least. There's probably going to be a couple of people there to help you pass your bike over the wall as you just climb over the stile, which is obviously much nicer for you and the bike. And as you get over there, you kind of you take a right-hand turn, and there's actually quite a nice shortcut through the middle, which I learned off of Rob Jebb by stealing his GPS off Strava. That's actually quite a good tip as well, is coming into the race. I think it's really helpful to actually have a GPS file of the race on your head unit or watch or whatever you're going to be using to record the race is having a GPS file. I think I stole mine from Rob Jebb. So I took his 2019 winning GPS file and just downloaded that and put it onto my head unit, so I knew exactly where I was going to be going at all times. I think that's probably a nice little tip in terms of what you can do is go on Strava, go to some of the segments, find a good rider, whether it's Rob Jebb or Paul Oldham. I wouldn't take Giles Drake from 2019 because he got lost on top of Ingleborough. So Giles, I'm hoping you know where you're going this year. I think that's quite a good tip to make sure that you've got a GPS file. So visibility can be quite poor on top of all the hills. So if you've got that GPS in front of you, it's just an extra kind of safety mechanism, especially if you've not reconned it at all. A lot of people, live further afield, that sort of thing. So if you've not reconned it, I think that's a really good tip to have is, a little GPS file to make sure you know where you're going all the time. Coming up those final steps to the top of Ingleborough, there's a couple of little shortcuts around there, but if you just hug the wall, you will find your way to the steps. And then up those little stairs, over to the checkpoint, scan your dibber, and then you're onto the descent, which is, for my money, I think the Ingleborough descent's the easiest. Obviously, you're the freshest as well. There's not a whole load of time to be made up down there as well. So I think for me, I was going to take it not easy, but not taking any massive risks, just making sure I'm not going to puncture or anything like that, keeping it in control, making sure I'm getting down to the road section in one piece and ready to kind of fight from that bit. For me, I was going to be swapping bikes down at Cold Coats at the bottom of the descent onto kind of a more gravel tyre. In the rules as well, you are only allowed to take bike swaps off-road for kind of mechanical reasons, which is obviously, swapping bikes for if you've got a puncture or whatever. So making sure if you do have assistance, it's sat within the off-road sections. For me, I was going to be swapping bikes at Cold Coats, which is right at the bottom of the hill before you get onto the road section where you scan your dibber at the bottom of the descent. Coming onto that road section, I was going to be taking a bottle full of, like beta fuel mix and maybe a gel or two as well. Really thinking about the feeding early doors, because if you kind of neglect it early on, I think you're quite at risk of running that kind of fine line between eating the right amount and full death. So thinking about feeding early and all that sort of stuff, taking in like a lot of drink as well, because dehydration is, especially for this like sort of length of event, so it's not a normal hour-long cross race. So making sure you're going to have enough to drink and enough to eat early doors, I think is really quite important. So probably trying to drink a whole bottle in between Cold Coats and Whernside is something that I was going to try and do. Probably take on board a gel and something like that as well to fuel me up for the upcoming ascent of Whernside. The ascent of Whernside is really just, again, I think it's something you can do at your own pace up those stairs. It's, it's a good 15, 20, 25 minutes of pure pain walking up those stairs, carrying your bike. For me last year, again, I came with quite a fast group. Someone caught us up on the road section and kind of dragged us to the bottom. So I almost got a free ride to the bottom and then just kind of eased off a little bit into the bottom of the steps just to make sure I could, carry at my own pace, not kind of getting caught up in trying to chase people in front of me to kind of wear myself out. I think that's really quite an important thing, is making sure that you're not going to blow yourself up later on in the race. I think for me, the Whernside descent is the most difficult. That's the one to be most aware of with the steps. I think it really is quite a tricky descent. It's something you really want to have your wits about you. And something me and my mates have been talking about is kind of the risk to reward ratio. I think there's a lot of stuff you can ride on there that is quite risky. And we kind of came up with the mantra that we'd rather kind of, if there's something really quite difficult coming up, like a big drop or something really quite technical, we would rather get off and maybe lose 10 seconds by, walking around it or, taking a slower line compared to trying to gain that 10 seconds and risking a crash, hurting yourself, breaking your bike, that sort of thing. So I think that's where you lose really big time. If you really attack the race from the start, taking big risks on the descent, I think that's probably how you win the race. I think it's also the quickest path to losing the race in terms of having a kind of a big error, a big mechanical, a big crash, something like that. I mean, I crashed twice down there last year. It definitely cost me time, confidence, all that sort of stuff. So I'm not saying walk the whole thing, but I'm saying be aware of where you are, making sure you're looking ahead. And if you see something that you think, right, okay, that's actually really quite tricky, or that looks a little bit out of my depth, I don't think there's really any shame in getting off and walking something. I think for me, I'd rather get down in one piece. Also, last year, I took a bottle at the bottom of Whernside and then obviously carried that, 500-600 grams all the way to the top. I didn't drink a sip of it, and then I crashed on the way down and lost the bottle. So for me, I wasn't going to be particularly feeding for bottles at the bottom of hills. I was thinking of, just leaving that out, maybe taking a gel, because when you're walking up the hill, something like eating a gel, I think it's not out of the realms of possibility. You can reach into your back pocket and, take a swig of that, rather than trying to, faff around for a bottle. Making sure that, you're thinking about these sorts of things in terms of optimizing what's going to make your race easier for yourself. Coming down there, another dibber at the bottom. I was going to grab a drink, probably a bit of food down there as well. And I was going to have someone down there with a spare bike in case I needed it. That essentially descent down from Ribblehead down to Pen-y-Ghent. It hurts, but it's definitely it's a quick pedaling descent. If you're in a group, that's super, super helpful because it's a long way to go down there by yourself. But I think that's really just a place to try and eat, recover from, what's been going on the last kind of 2 hours of your race, 3 hours of your race, and making sure you are kind of ready to attack that final descent of Pen-y-Ghent. Coming into the bottom of Pen-y-Ghent is basically what you've got left in the tank. I think the ascent of Pen-y-Ghent is physically the easiest, but it's mentally the hardest because you've just got nothing in the tank. It's quite a lot of it is rideable actually. Come up the bottom section, it's fairly rough and rocky, but again, it's all rideable. And then you take that right turn at the crossroads, you start to come to the steeper inclines, and that's where you start to come to that risk of getting off and walking. And that's where the gear ratios really come into play in terms of if you've got a nice and easy gear to be able to spin up there, especially with, stuff like SRAM axis. If you've got like a mountain bike cassette on the back, like someone like Nick Craig does, that's really going to make your life so much better up there. Because when you're getting off and walking, it's just pain and suffering. As you're coming up there, it's just about what you've got left in your legs and what you've got left in your head. Trying to keep positive up there, making sure you're still just pushing on as much as you can, because I think there's a lot of time to be made up on Pen-y-Ghent, because that's where everyone is flagging. So if you've still got something left in the tank, that's where you've got time to make up. So once you get to the top, there's not really too much pedaling left in the race. That's where you really want to attack if you've got anything left. Conservative on the first two and then really empty the tank up there, because coming back down, the descent is not horrendous. It's pretty much all rideable except for kind of one little section at the top, but you've got a nice little grass loop you go around. Again, it's all signed out, but if you've got that little GPS on your head unit, it just makes life a little bit easier, so you know exactly where you're going. Because as you come off the top, there's a little grass descent, a couple of bumpy bits in it, but nothing bad. And you turn back onto the path. And for my money, that top section of the path where you come back on is quite a high risk section. Last year I got off and walked because I had cramp in my hands, so I couldn't either hold or let go of the brakes. And then, that was my kind of conservative mentality in that way, in terms of making sure I was going to get to the bottom. So I was really suffering down there. So if you've got anything left in the tank, there's quite a lot to be gained down there. And as you come back onto the road section, that is just like the last 10 minutes of just whatever's left in the tank. There's not really anything to be gained or lost there. It's just smash it to the finish. Obviously, you don't really need any food or drink down there because it's just like 10 minutes of pain back to Helith Bridge. But that's about that. I think main things to take away is making sure you're eating and drinking early doors, getting yourself fueled for the rest of the race. And for me, it's a conservative pacing plan, that kind of negative split mentality that comes from, the track background or the Sky kind of TT preparation, making sure that you've got something left in the tank for the end of the race, because that's where time is really gained and lost. So let me know what you think. Hopefully that was quite a comprehensive preview to the Three Peaks. I'm hoping I'll be there, but it's not looking particularly likely. Give us a comment. Let me know what you think. Thanks for watching, and buy the grease syringes.